Something just broke between two countries that haven't fought a war in over 200 years. Not a border dispute, not a diplomatic snub. A trade relationship that took 80 years to build, shattered in 72 hours. And by the time I'm done explaining this to you, you're going to understand something most people watching the news right now don't. This isn't really about tariffs. It's about a law so old, so untested, that using it right now might be the most dangerous thing either country has done to the other in a generation. Stick with me. Because what happens next affects your grocery bill, your job, and possibly the next decade of how America does business with the rest of the world. The relationship you didn't know was this deep. Let's start with a number that should stop you in your tracks. Nearly 72% of everything Canada sells to the world, it sells to the United States. Not luxury goods, not niche exports, energy, raw materials, auto parts, food. The stuff that keeps American factories running and American shelves stocked. For decades, this relationship ran on rules. First NAFTA, then its replacement, the USMCA. Were those deals perfect? No. Canada has real protectionist quirks, a complicated dairy supply system, provincial liquor boards that have kept American alcohol off shelves in ways that genuinely frustrate U.S. producers. Those are legitimate grievances. Nobody serious denies that. But here's the point that matters. There was a process for fixing those grievances. A framework. Both countries agreed to play by it. That framework just got blown up. The law nobody has ever used. On July 20th, 3 proclamations were signed invoking something called Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. Yes, 1930, the Smoot-Hawley era, to slap 50% tariffs on a wide range of Canadian goods. Here's what should genuinely alarm you. Section 338 has never, not once, been used to actually impose tariffs. Not by any president in nearly a century. The Congressional Research Service confirmed this earlier this year. It's been referenced as leverage in negotiations decades ago, but nobody has ever pulled the trigger. Until now. And the tariffs authorized under it aren't a token gesture. They're the maximum the statute allows. 50%, covering 554 separate tariff lines. Roughly $20 billion a year in imports. Cement, furniture, clothing, dairy, wine, hockey sticks, fishing rods. Section 3. Is there a legitimate complaint here? Now, to be fair, there's a real argument buried in here. Canada imposes a 25% retaliatory tariff on American automobiles, and it does so specifically targeting the U.S., without applying the same treatment to other trading partners. That's a legitimate grievance. If you're a U.S. automaker, that stings, and you'd be right to be frustrated. But here's the uncomfortable part of the timeline that gets lost. Canada's retaliatory tariffs exist because the U.S. imposed tariffs first. This didn't start with Canada being unreasonable in a vacuum. It's a cycle. And right now, that cycle just escalated using a tool that has no regulatory framework, no court precedent, and no real limits on how it can be used next. Section 4. The 48 hours that almost fixed this. Here's where it gets almost tragic, because there was a moment, a real moment, where this looked like it might resolve peacefully. The 50% tariffs were set to take effect on August 19th. Hours before the deadline, they were paused for 3 days. A statement went out suggesting that, subject to finalizing paperwork, the two countries had reached a deal. Canada's side confirmed that intensive talks had made substantial progress. For about 48 hours, there was real hope. Then, late on a Friday night, it collapsed. Canada suspended negotiations. Its negotiators were called back home. The official reason given, last-minute changes to the American proposed terms were unfair and uneconomic. Changes that, in their words, called into question whether any deal with the U.S. could be trusted to hold. What was Canada reportedly willing to offer? Dropping its remaining retaliatory tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos, encouraging provinces to put American alcohol back on shelves, real concessions. What killed it, according to Canadian officials? Washington's final demands went too far. The phrase used was blunt. They asked too much and offered too little. At 12:01 that night, the 50% tariffs went live. $20 billion in Canadian goods now hit with duties. And Canada announced it would retaliate dollar for dollar effective September 8th, targeting American steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp and paper, and electronics. Why this is bigger than a trade dispute. Here's what should worry you more than the tariffs themselves. The precedent. For decades, disputes between allied countries got resolved through established channels. The WTO, bilateral negotiations inside agreed-upon structures. Messy, slow, imperfect, but predictable. What just happened is different. A 96-year-old Depression-era statute, with no implementing regulations, no judicial precedent, no established process, was used to override a trade agreement that was negotiated, signed, and ratified by both governments. And once you do that once, You've sent a message to every country that has ever signed a trade deal with the United States. Compliance doesn't protect you. The agreement you signed can be overridden overnight by a law older than your grandparents. That's not leverage, that's unpredictability. And in international trade, unpredictability is the single most expensive thing you can create. Because businesses don't build factories, sign contracts, or hire workers in countries whose word they can't rely on. Where this goes from here. So what happens next? Let's be honest about the short term. It doesn't look good. September 8th is the next flashpoint. That's when Canada's retaliatory tariffs hit American exports, and both sides are now boxed in by their own public commitments. On the American side, midterm elections are coming in November, and consumers are already frustrated about the cost of living. 50% tariffs on $20 billion of Canadian goods aren't paid by Canada. They're paid by American importers, who pass the cost down to American consumers. And that's a real political liability heading into an election. On the Canadian side, the government has staked significant political credibility on standing firm and not backing down to American pressure. Provinces are still keeping American alcohol off shelves, a symbolic move with real weight. Reversing course now would carry its own political cost. When a trade dispute becomes personal, when both sides have made public promises they can't easily walk back, it gets harder to solve, not easier. One trade law expert summarized it well. At a certain point, escalation stops being a choice and starts being a default. The most likely near-term path is more of the same. Tariffs met with tariffs, rhetoric met with rhetoric, and an off-ramp that gets harder to find with every passing week. In the meantime, it's American farmers, American manufacturers, and American families who feel it first, in higher prices, tighter margins, and fewer options. The bigger picture. Here's the thing that ties this all together, and it's the part I think gets lost in the noise. The strength of any country's economic power isn't just its GDP or its military. It's whether other countries can trust its word. That trust is the foundation of every trade relationship, every treaty, every handshake deal that keeps global commerce moving. When that trust gets damaged, when an agreement one government signs can be overridden by the next through a legal loophole nobody saw coming, it doesn't just hurt one relationship. It changes how every country thinking about doing business with you calculates risk going forward. Credibility isn't something you can tariff your way back to. It's built slowly through consistency. And it can be spent fast through exactly the kind of escalation cycle now playing out between two countries that, until 72 hours ago, most people assumed would never end up here. So here's where I'll leave you. This story is still unfolding. September 8th is coming. Whether this turns into a full-blown trade war or finds an unexpected off-ramp depends on decisions being made right now on both sides of a border that, for most of your life, you probably never thought twice about. If this affected your understanding of what's actually happening, not the 60-second cable version, but the actual mechanics of it, let me know in the comments and subscribe, because I'm going to keep tracking this one closely as it develops.